Alright, we're live.
And today is August 9th, and this is a curriculum and learning committee meeting. And the meeting is called to order at 5:36. That's the,
You been properly posted?
yes. Did you get to take a look at the minutes?
Yes, I motion to approve.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Perfect timing.
Sorry.
All
All I did was the minutes. So you can take a look Where are we now?
Yeah, we are ready, if actually
Sure, I'm ready.
for the discussion items, and our first,
Okay.
you want me to go
Sure,
ahead?
yes,
First
please.
discussion item
Thank you.
is our academic update at Shady Lane and Ben Franklin. This is our final academic update
Oh,
to
yeah.
close out the last school year, so just in time before the new school year. So I appreciate our principals being willing to come in and kind of share now with us kind of a recap. Just a high level recap of where you've been. So we have Brad Hoffman here, principal at Shady Lane, and Dave Peters, who is the associate principal at Ben Franklin and did a wonderful job for us closing out the school year as acting principal. So he's here to share with us as well. And I will pull up.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I know you guys are busy, right?
This is the time of year I
Yes.
said hiring and new students, and it's a busy but fun time of year, but very busy, so. Well, I
Excited
promise
for the
not to
new
have
school
the academic update for the year in August.
Yeah.
That's
Just
an
kind of worked
extra
out that way,
It
didn't it?
did, it's been an unusual year all the way through, but I think they've got some fun things to share, so. I'll let them jump in and I will drive, so just give me the high sign if I don't read the cue, you can tell me next slide. and I'll-
Got it. I think mine are first, right? So
Yeah, so, and I guess actually I always remind us of our mission and vision, our connected work and our big aims, and each school does planning around the big aims to make sure their work is connected and continues to follow our continuous improvement practices.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. So Shady Lane.
All right. So I guess one of the benefits of being pushed back and delayed a little bit is that we had a lot of end of the year data that we can talk about and wrap
Awesome.
up. So we got the end of the year meant to be a fairly high level, but happy to dig in a little bit deeper at anything if there's any questions. So we had a pretty successful year by a lot of measures. Some things obviously left to work on, as there always are, but in terms of literacy, some of our biggest summative measures and even some of a lot of them are also leading or predictive measures that lead to. So like our running records that we do 3 times a year, we have our end of the year proficiency there at 84%, which we feel strong about. So it was 78% at the end of the previous year, so some really nice growth there. Through MAP in there, second grade is the only grade that takes MAP at Ben Franklin and Shady Lane. And for a while we were not, third on up takes it, but we started to take it with second graders to give a outside measure and some data to Valley View and to Riverside as they're coming in, and it's starting to be closer to some of those standardized tests like Forward. And so the results are not strong. It was a nice improvement from last year, but it continues to be one of our pain points is the assessments that we're doing in the classroom and how they compare to computer-based assessments, and then not falling into the trap of blaming the assessment or saying it's the first time kids take it. I think there are some elements to that, kids sitting down and for 60 minutes to take a test on a computer, which does not mirror anything that they're doing during the normal day, but there's also different ways of asking that. Like we don't create a ton of opportunities for kids to read large passages and answer multiple choice questions on a computer. A little more immersed into some more genuine reading, but those are pieces that we want to continue to look at is and walking the fine line so that we're not going overboard to teaching to a test where we're spending time just to prepare them to look good on the forward, but that we're actually providing with some genuine reading activities and learning, but also preparing for those tests because, like it or not, standardized tests are the future of the school, third grade on up for sure. So, but some improvement from the previous year. And then our 4K literacy assessment, we were at 76 proficient, which was down from the previous year. But one thing that's not captured in here is the growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year was about the same as the previous year. So kids came in a little bit less proficient, I guess, with some of the skills compared to the previous year's group. So I know our 4K team was really pleased with the growth that they saw, but our end result was down from the previous year. This year going forward, that assessment's gonna be a little bit different, so it'll be hard to kind of compare those results the next year, but we think we're honing in on more important early literacy skills that will be predictive of overall literacy going
So
forward.
be honing into different literacy like components a little bit.
Getting more for that
Okay.
phonological awareness that we
Oh,
talked about,
okay,
so
sure.
yeah,
Mhm.
We have some elements of phonological awareness right now, but not enough that we're formally assessing that is really predictive. So right now we look at letter ID, uppercase, lowercase, letter sound, rhyme, concepts about print, all important things, but the new ones include more. So beginning sounds, ending sounds, substituting sounds, deleting, adding, all of those things that go into reading. So it'll be much more comprehensive, which will lead to better, more targeted
Which
instruction.
aligns with a lot of the work that we're doing with early literacy and
Correct.
to
some of the
focus.
things that we've heard before, yeah, yeah.
And just,
That it all
universal
connects.
across the board, that's the trend in education is going in that direction, so.
Don't ask me why, but I watched an 8-minute video on YouTube on a teacher presenting Hager, like doing it virtually, I think, maybe
Oh, okay,
for a component in case they need it for home use or, so, cause I'm on I follow a group called the Science of Reading, like some group, there's a lot of those groups out there, right? And yeah, it reminded me of my old electric company days when I
Oh,
would come
yeah.
home and watch PBS and you probably don't
They
know
knew
what
what they
that
were
is, right?
doing when they're, I know, yeah, they knew what they were doing when
But
they
yeah,
were putting those
right, I
videos
know,
up.
so yeah, I'll be curious if, when we
Yeah.
come back to it all to see. Very
You
interesting.
mentioned that, there was some growth, do you have an idea in regards to how much growth in the
From
literacy?
4K,
Yeah, do you have an
I
idea?
can,
EOU means end of unit?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
end of unit,
Ah,
end
that's
of-
okay, I was
end of-
guessing, but yeah.
end of year, end of unit, so while I'm pulling this up, we can talk math through 90% proficient, all of our end of unit
Mhm,
assessments, kindergarten through second grade, which was up from 90, and once we hit over 90, that's something to celebrate, hard to move,
Heck
but
yeah.
but good. And then our math proficiency on there too is at 62%, stronger than our literacy, still not something to feel satisfied with, but again, a nice jump from the previous year.
Mhm.
Do you think that the assessments that we're using are capturing the actual results? Like these, that 76% proficient, this, that 91%, is that pretty?
I would just wanted to interject while I was thinking about it, this might be helpful context. So when we're talking about proficient on the math test, it's comparing to the expectation of the Wisconsin Forward exam.
Yeah.
So it is that to be proficient on the Wisconsin Forward exam, or to be projected to be proficient on the Wisconsin Forward by the MAP test, you roughly have to be between, I think it's at least at the 67th percentile nationally,
Okay,
and it's about, well above 50%, I guess. Just to hit that proficient mark, varies a little by time of year and grade level, so it is a more rigorous expectation than we might otherwise think about. So
Sure.
that just,
So if we were a completely typical group of second graders, only 33% of them would be proficient by definition of what percentile means. That's not okay with us, so,
Mhm.
45% of ours are performing in the upper 67th percentile, which is better than the average typical thing, but we'd like to see more. Those percentiles are high.
Do you typically see that though, like the assessments and the math tests? I mean, it's just like there's a variance, it's not as,
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
MAP is measuring things a little bit differently than what we do in our
Right,
classroom
true.
assessments, so
Yeah.
it's not necessarily comparing
yeah.
apples to apples.
And it's a
So
different
just
mode
another-
too, I
it
wonder
is.
if like, cause they're younger and they're just
Yep.
not as used to that mode. Cause one's on computer, right, and the other one's
Yes.
not.
Yeah, it is very different than what we're typically seeing in the classroom, although I always caution teachers from like, yep, all true and all those things, and it's difficult for a kid to sit down for 30 minutes and do that, and it gets pretty tempting to just click things, and that may affect some kids.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we just keep ascribing it to that, we're never gonna make any movement or any growth
Well,
or find
right,
any of the
exactly.
gaps, and so, yes, I do think that is part of it. And there are a lot of kids that aren't motivated by a good test number, like, I want my kids' test scores to come back good, and, well, and I think they do too, but I know like a lot of other kids are just like, I don't care if I'm proficient on this, that isn't as motivating, it's a little disconnected from their teacher, from their report card, but
Sure.
not enough to
Yeah.
make up for the point of improvement that we'd like to see.
Oh,
One-
exactly.
One of the other things is like with the forward test, the way that they measure like proficient versus advanced, it's not necessarily, it's divided into 4 areas, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily 50th percentile, 75th and things like that.
Mhm.
I know a student that was 99th percentile, but was just within the advanced range, it's like, wait,
Yeah,
so you're
I know,
telling me
isn't that
that
crazy how that
there's only
goes?
1% that's in this whole big chunk of above?
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily as clear, so that could be part of it too, is that
Yeah,
forward, they're still trying to refine some of those pieces and make it be, our assessments that we use be more predictive of success going
Right.
forward. It's not necessarily a great correlation, and I mean, you never have that when it's coming from 2 different organizations and things like that,
Yeah.
but this one predicts for that and things like that.
yeah, okay.
So I needed to answer your question, at the beginning, and I don't know if it helps if you have the context or not, but we measure against the same end of year standard. It doesn't like progress throughout the year, so 12% of the kids at the beginning of the year were proficient on the end of the year standard, up to then 76, which makes sense, they're just entering 4K, it's not something we expect a ton to. The previous year, and I don't have the number, but I remember it was higher, so we had more kids coming in with more skills the previous year, which resulted in 83% of them being proficient at the end of the year, and this year was a little bit lower. And so it was some good growth, but not to the point that we wanted to see. Yeah, we covered that, so. If there's no other questions, you can come to the next one. So these are the student experience ones, the non-academic data. The way the slide was set up was just some pluses, some celebrations, and some things to hone in on some change. So 90.9% of our students were present at school 90% of the time or more. I know that's 2% in the same statement, so if you're not sure what I'm talking about, I can explain a little bit further. It was quite a jump from the previous couple years. Pre-COVID, those numbers were up in like the mid-90s. And then since COVID, they were in the 80s, and it was, and I get it, I think the attitudes towards attendance have changed, and we were just talking about this today and anything, even as adults, like, I feel like it used to be, you're sick and you came to work, good for you, thanks for still showing up. And now it's like, oh, you stayed home and didn't get everybody else sick, thank you for not getting everybody else sick. And so I think that's probably nationwide, we have different attitudes about showing up to school and work sick, good, bad, or otherwise. And so getting, and I don't want kids at school when they're throwing up, like, so kids need to miss some of the time, but there
Well, it's
was,
that whole wait 24 hours thing, I think more and more parents are subscribing to that, right? I mean, wait 24 hours after the last fever or whatever.
we still have, I mean, anecdotally and individual, a lot of attendance concerns that don't have to do with
No.
illness. And so trying to send 2 messages that seem opposing sometimes, which is like, please get your kid to school, it's important, that's how they learn, and please don't send them to school when they're sick. And I did a couple years ago when we were still quarantining kids, I just sent home a general letter about attendance on the same day that we had to quarantine a class, and I got lit up by a couple of parents, like, are you kidding me? I didn't want my kid to be at home, and you sent them home, and now you're telling me they need to be at school, and I'm like, yep, it was a very unfortunate timing of
Yeah,
that.
it's a crazy, yeah, unfortunate and
So-
It's a different
crazy.
situation, right?
But, so anyway, some good
Somebody
growth.
walked into my hospital today and brought up the C word. I'm like, are you kidding me? So like, we're not talking about that right now.
So yeah, some good growth, not back up to where it was pre-COVID levels, but some recovery, so that's a celebration that we put in there. Another celebration was we had 41 students with multiple behavior referrals. I mean, 41's a lot, but really that's less than 10% of our students. And when we say multiple, that means more than one. So no kids can have a perfect year, a perfect day all the time. So one of the ways we look at our behavior data is the number of students with multiple behavior referrals.
That's considered the majors, right?
We don't distinguish major and minor anymore. We had for years, a couple of years ago, we stopped because it was it's really hard to paint a lot of behaviors as black and white of you did this is major, cause there's some things on, that was on our minor list that depending on the circumstances was pretty major. And some things are on the major list that considering the circumstances is not that major, even just physical contact is hard, there's a big range from bumping into somebody repeatedly in line to punching somebody in the face, it's a big difference. And so we're just focusing on what happened with that kid in that situation and being restorative with it, so we're counting all referrals in that. So our goal is to have as few kids as possible with multiple referrals. So we want 90% of our kids to have less than five referrals. 96% of ours were. Oh, I don't think I put that up there. Which is a little bit different than multiple referrals. We're talking about 5. So a good celebration there.
Okay.
Only 1 suspension. Any suspension feels like a failure. I hate to say I'm celebrating a suspension, but only 1 is good. We haven't had any for a couple of years, and it wasn't a huge thing. And then according to our wellness survey, 100% of second graders said they feel connected to 1 or more classmates. And I only say second graders because those are the only ones that we gave the survey to. And 99% of second graders feel connected to at least 1 adult, which means there was 1 student that said no. And I do suspect that he maybe didn't understand the question, because he has a lot of adults that work with him. But still, we also don't want to fall into the trap of just assuming that we feel like we're connected to kids, that they also feel that they don't have anybody. But still, 99% was a celebration. So
How is that gauged? How is that assessed?
with the question, in our survey, our wellness survey,
Oh, the
and we
wellness
give those
survey?
one-on-one sit down and say, cause I've done some of them too, and it's like, do you have friends at school? And they'll say yes or no, and they say, how many? You say 1 friend, a couple friends, lots of friends, and they'll say, and then a lot of times I'll ask who. It's nice to just kind of get that qualitative data and just chat with kids too, and then I'll say, do you have 1 adult that you can turn to or that's got your back? That's the verbiage I like to use a lot. Kids will say, yeah, and I'll say who. And I always like to hear kids who list more than just a classroom teacher. Classroom teacher is easy to say they're connected with, but we want them to be connected with more adults than just a classroom teacher.
So it's one-on-one?
And
Second grade.
I don't feel like we get great
Yeah.
results having
Yeah.
them sit on the computer and type that stuff out. And it's time consuming, but it's valuable. It's a fun little chat with kids, and it's always nice when you say, do you have an adult that's got your back? And they say, yeah, you. I'm like, yes. Yeah, you're right, I do.
It's 99%.
And how many, yeah, cause you're right there.
Did you give me that 1%?
They better say it.
I didn't give that
You
kid
just kept looking like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, how is that
There's the
data
hint.
skewed?
Yeah, I think the validity is from
You should say, everybody except me.
Except, of course,
Name
except
somebody
me, do you
except
have
me.
anybody else?
I say, of course me, but who else?
It's a given. And then some deltas, things we wanna work on and focus on is only 49%, or not only, but 49% of kids said school makes them feel nervous, stressed, or overwhelmed.
Is that a higher number since COVID?
We didn't give this survey this way before COVID.
Okay.
So I don't know, I don't have a great baseline. I suspect that asking kids, does school make you feel nervous, stressed, or overwhelmed? May
Makes them
entice them to
nervous.
consider it.
Right now.
Just a follow-up question to that, because
Yes.
that's so
Yeah.
broad.
The next question is, do you have ways to, what do I say, do you have ways to deal with or ways to help you when you feel
Yeah.
nervous or stressed or overwhelmed? And so the plus to that is it's like 96 or 98% of kids said, and really in all reality, like kids, everybody should experience some stress and then
That's
deal with it,
normal,
right?
yeah.
Overwhelmed, no kid should feel overwhelmed on a daily basis in elementary school, right? So, but you get the perspective of 7 or 8 year olds, and so I don't love that it says 49. I'm not panicking. I don't feel like kids are just freaking out at school, because many of them say they've got ways to deal with it, and we say like what? And I think some of the choices are like, oh, my friends or my teacher or deep breathing or, some of those techniques. So.
One of my questions is there one to delineate in regards to, because one child's interpretation of what stress overwhelmed is different. Meaning I couldn't find my lunch today, or a
Yep.
friend didn't talk to me versus I have issues at home. So that's what I mean by a follow-up, just at least be, understanding of
Like give an example.
Yeah, I
There's the
can-
open-ended opportunity for them to share.
Yeah,
And I do get a lot of like, I don't know, one of the questions I think we used to ask was, how was your weekend? you know, just kind of getting, how are you entering school on Monday? And terrible. I was like, oh, why? And it was like, we ran out of Lucky Charms. I was like, oh, okay. You know, they're 8-year-olds where things are extreme answers either way. But
Well, right, so that, like,
So
if they
that's
say
what-
yes to stress, then it might be like,
Because of
I didn't have Lucky Charms. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
like at their level.
50% is a lot, but if you can understand where.
Yeah, diving into the
so then we
open-ended
ask,
piece
do
is
you
very
have positive ways to help your body feel calm when you feel nervous, stressed, or overwhelmed? And 91% said yes. We have some other open-ended questions too, so, I mean, they go a little bit deeper, and I think the information for the people who deliver it, so classroom teachers or we help out sometimes as principals, like it's more valuable, I think, just remembering the conversation than just looking at the raw data, but,
Like,
what
I
else,
almost think it'd
what
be
else says
more-
school makes you feel nervous or stressed or uncomfortable? Someone says all the drills, fire drills.
Mhm.
Someone says being around strangers, and I'm like, but that doesn't happen in school. I mean, I'm just reading some
Yeah.
of these. Bugs and bad dreams.
Yes. That was a
I
good
was
one,
like,
really.
well, do you have dreams while you're at school? So darkness, bugs, loud noises. So, I mean, it is entertaining, but we wanna really hone in on kids who say, like, kids who pick on me, or
Yeah.
my teacher yells at me, or, and I don't think I've heard that question, but like, those are the things we wanna.
And then you said that this wasn't given before COVID, was this the first year that this was given then? Is this kind of a new thing?
No, the previous year, second year, maybe third.
Second year, okay.
And we used to do, our council used to do things we called minute meetings, where they were intended to be a minute, but when I'm giving it, it's not a minute, it's 5 minutes. Where it's just checking in really quick, like, how
Yeah.
are things going, who are your friends? And just making that connection, so,
Keep it in the
you know, in
pulse.
some forms, we've obviously been checking in with kids, but not comparative data.
Got it.
And then the last delta on there is just some inconsistent behavior referral reporting. We had a leadership meeting today and it came up again is, you know, do we really trust our behavior referral reporting? Because like, I'll just give the example, you get a kid who every day maybe struggles to stay attending to what's going on in the class and is kind of squirreling around and distracting other kids. If it's happening every day, it's not getting written up every single day, because it gets exhausting to do that. And so sometimes we'll, you know, you'll look at certain kids and it was like 4, we only had 4 behavior referrals the whole year. I was pretty sure there was more things that we did, but you know, when we start to get individualized student plans, sometimes we drop off our behavior reporting, so it's not 100% like reliable. There's some nuance to it, which makes it a little bit tricky to really look at our data, but it all makes sense. It's not people just giving up on it. It's just
Moving from one data set to the other essentially.
right. So we talked about that today. Like, do we look at our goals a little differently? Like, do we talk about the number of students who have individual support plans? And I was like, maybe that would be good, but that also implies that our goal is to reduce that, which then could reduce support instead of actually reducing behavior problems. And so there's a lot of nuance to it. It's tricky that we're going through. It's something that we put up as a delta because we want to continue to refine, but
So you're still working up, refining it.
I feel like
You're
every year
always
we have a
on, yeah,
conversation about it,
always,
but yes.
It is, I remember as a principal that being a really tricky thing,
Yeah.
just cause the real and, other than the specific reporting that needs to be reported to DPI, and I'm talking the really
Yeah,
serious stuff or
yeah.
suspensions from school, the daily stuff, the reporting structure is, and the purpose of looking at the data is to help us find those patterns and then address them with the plan, and then once you start addressing it with the plan, you know, I'm monitoring the plan a little bit differently, I'm not necessarily going to the system
Yeah.
to look at how that student is doing, but I will, so again, and it does become an exhausting record keeping piece.
Yeah.
But we're addressing, you know, the original issue, and then for that student, we'll just work the plan and continue to communicate around the plan. And then if there was something major that was a suspension or something that needed to be reported beyond, then we would put that in. But I probably, that with my
Yeah,
experience as a principal,
yeah,
right
not
or
a
wrong,
concern.
that was kind of how we managed it, because it just, we needed to find a way to manage it.
I'm not concerned at all about our big stuff that
Yeah.
gets reported, recorded, everything's good. It's just more some of that persistent, you know, kids were maybe disruptive often throughout the day versus writing things out all the time. Now we're doing you know, we may have pulled that information into a daily sheet that we're using to communicate home, and then it doesn't get entered in with the rest of our behavior referrals sometimes, and which is
Well, it's
good
communicated.
and purposeful for that kid. Nothing is, there's no missing pieces for supporting that kid communicating with parents. The missing pieces,
It's just,
it kind of pulls out of some of our data set
Yeah.
and makes it a little bit tricky for us to make school-wide decisions on hey, this we've seen happen a lot, let's maybe go into some reteaching of these behaviors and strategies, but.
That was always
We
a
try to
push.
work on like making it system-wide too, to be
Yeah,
consistent, because I'm just reflecting back on the
System.
bullying,
Right,
report.
so,
And how every building did their own thing, and so that's why I think some of
yeah.
the discrepancy in regards to the numbers can.
Yeah, and that would
Manifest
be a
because-
little bit different because it's bullying and that has to be reported more broadly. So it would have to be recorded in the system. So I think there's been some
Versus-
conversation with Dr. Schiefer about systematizing some of that. But I don't know where that landed necessarily, but it is important to have that consistency, but I do remember those building specific conversations where it's like I can't put, just the benefit of putting every single thing in, but being consistent about those really big things,
Correct.
to make sure that bullying is reported appropriately, et cetera, so.
And the other thing with these ones, they're the individualized plans frequently for the student, and so it's some of the data collection that we're having because it's for this student in specific or in particular, and it's a recess behavior and things like that, and so it might not be the whole day, and so it doesn't fall within the whole school like population or pulling of the data. But then for that student, it could be something that's on its way to like an IEP or things like that, and so we're looking for very specific pieces for them. So we collect it, it just doesn't get put into that pool necessarily.
Yeah.
If it is a bigger
System.
piece, then yes, it
Okay.
still does go to it, but some of those other fine tuning of it, of like, okay, what supports does this student really need for it? But it's not necessarily that whole school pool of it.
And it shouldn't affect like then, because we're watching for those bigger things, shouldn't affect like the bullying report or the discipline report that goes to DPI. So that's where this should not
Correct.
impact that in any way.
Very good.
Okay.
So areas of focus going into next year, we've kind of identified 3 areas of priority at Shady Lane, and that's literacy, our social skills and our emotional skills, and then our teamwork. So around our early literacy, we're continuing our work with the CESA 6 Early Literacy Center, which includes our academy and all the things we've been rolling for a couple of years now, reviewing curriculum, we've added some pieces like you had mentioned, Haggerty early on. Updating our assessments, which we talked a little bit about too, not just in 4K, but for all kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, some phonological awareness screeners. And just continuing our professional development for teachers and for EAs around high leverage strategies and best practices for teaching literacy. Suspect that will be an area of priority for several years to come, until we just figure it all out, so. And then, social emotional skills work, continuing to teach specific behaviors in specific environments, and that's, one of the reasons we say for like good data keeping, so that we can see when patterns are developing and spots arise, so we can attack those. And continue with restorative conversations around behavior, not just, punitive, but restorative, getting kids to understand, especially the younger kids, understanding the impact of their behavior, why it was a problem, not just because I said so, but because this is how it impacts other people, and then always focused on making it right, what do we need to do to make it right. And then, like I said, just accurate reporting and data review, and our consistent practices there, and then all that work gets done through high performing teams, so we were revisiting some of our PLC structures, and continuing to build those with our leadership team being our model for that, and then just focusing on the culture of our building for learning, challenging our teams to have tough conversations, to be vulnerable, to look at their data and their teaching without defensiveness and openness, and being constructive and breaking down all those personal barriers most people have about stuff, but good work, important work, and so that's our foci for this coming year.
What does PLC structures?
So PLC stands for Professional Learning Community, and a professional learning community is one, it describes a whole school, but it describes a school that is crystal clear on what we want students to be able to do and to learn.
Okay.
And to be clear on how we're gonna know when we get there and have plans when they're not there, and have plans when they're already there. And that's, I mean, the simplified version of those are the four, essential questions of a PLC, but it's the way that we team, the way that we look at data, the way that we talk about our instruction, the way that we adjust our instruction.
Sure.
So, the concept of a PLC is pretty old, 20, 30 years old. But we at Shady Lane years ago, early in my years as principal, like, we went to some institutes, we started to build. I feel like kind of cooled off a little bit, and we're revisiting, did a book study as a leadership team on PLCs specifically for K2 schools, which was awesome that somebody wrote that very specifically for our level. It was really impactful, so.
Okay.
It's good stuff.
Thank you.
That's right.
Alright, well, Ben Franklin's gonna be similar,
Okay.
so you'll see, obviously some of the, similar data points and things like that, but, and then a little bit different with some of our focuses. So our, literacy, we had 73% proficient with our end of the year, for our running records, and once again, that's the, one-on-one assessment that the teacher gives this student, where the student has an opportunity to read a passage, and then answer some questions about what they read. The teacher's kind of tracking them as they go to check for fluency, errors, corrections, things like that. So it gives them a little bit better picture of who they are as a reader versus just read this passage and then answer questions on their own, kind of thing. The other part for our spring map, once again, as Brad said, it's the first time or second time that the kids are taking it. It's one of those tests that we had removed a handful of years ago, but we are at 45% proficient, whereas the previous year we were at 40%. So moved up a little bit with that part. For the literacy, with our end of the year assessment with the 4K, we had 85% proficient, whereas the previous year we were at 88, so it was a little bit of a dip. I did pull up the beginning of the year to end of the year. And once again, this is one of those tests where it's the benchmark at the end of the year, so it's how high can you reach, and we don't lower it to start the year, this is where you're trying to get. We had 10% proficient to start the year, which makes sense, and then went up to 85, so it was still a big jump, and so a little bit dip from the previous year, but improvement along the way. And I pulled up the years prior as well, and they were all right around that same percentage, 85, 86 range, so it's pretty consistent with what we've seen over the last few years with the 4K literacy. Once again, for math then, with the end of the year assessments, 90% of the students proficient on their assessments. We were right at the same part for the previous year, so not a whole big change on that, but once again, 90%, and it's a pretty high, lofty measurement already, and so sticking with it was good to see. And then with the spring math map, we went up from 53 up to 58% proficient, and once again, that's a second grade specific test that we've given. Any questions on it? I think I kind of answered a few, but
Just a quick question, because I'm looking at the last year's numbers too, and I know that just Shady Lane's numbers are always a little bit higher than Ben Franklin. In the last year, just at the running records, there was about probably a 5% discrepancy. And this year, theirs is a larger discrepancy, because for Ben Franklin, 73% versus 84, so there's over a 10% discrepancy. I mean, I know you inherited.
It's like,
With my 8 weeks of experience.
Much expertise.
which piece are you looking at?
The running record.
The running record.
Because the last year, was like 5%, and then now it's 11%, so I just see that's a even a bigger gap between both schools, when historically it's been fairly narrow, so I just don't, I know you probably don't have answers, but that's the one.
Well, one of the things that I will say is like with this assessment, this is the one where it's a little bit more subjective, so that's the hard part for it. It's really great to get information about your students and figure out, hey, Johnny needs a little bit more help with this, Lucy needs help with that. But then like we try to collaborate and calibrate for a staff member, so that whoever's class they're in, they would get, it doesn't matter if I'm grading them or somebody else, that you'd be as close as possible, but that does happen. I don't know the last time that we've done that calibration piece necessarily to ensure, hey, Shady Lane, Ben Franklin were grading the same way.
School to school.
So that is a piece, especially with this test, it's very subjective, that you could have it. There is a framework or a script, if you will, that you do follow. But, I mean, there's wiggle room on it, like who makes the kid say this exact thing before they say you're good to go?
Yeah.
Or there might be somebody else like, oh yeah, like I've worked with the kid for a year, I know that this kid doesn't give in-depth, deep answers, they got it, but they didn't quite elaborate as much as somebody else. So that could be
Right, it
the
could be
piece for that.
variability from teacher to teacher and like judgment
Correct.
lines.
But other than that, yeah, I don't have an answer for
Yeah,
that piece of it. I just know that even as a grade level team, historically, we would meet and kind of talk about some of those pieces, especially like there's certain books where it's like, man, this D level book or whatever level it is, it's just a little bit harder, or there's like one piece that the students always kind of struggle with, and it's like, man, that question, the way it's worded is just not the greatest.
yeah,
And we try to tell everybody to make sure that they're consistent with it, but if somebody took liberties and they rephrased it just that little bit, like that could cause a change in it as well,
Sure.
those kind of pieces.
interesting.
Any other questions on it?
No, that is interesting though, cause 11% is a lot. So, yeah, it's
I
just
just
interesting.
noticed that.
Yeah.
That'll be something for us to continue to look at.
Mhm.
So for our just overall pieces of some of our students or our student experience, 29 of our students with more than 2 behavioral referrals. One of the things, and the reason I phrased it with that was looking at it, we had, I think it was 45 total that had more than one. So there was 16 that had that too, and so it was a big drop, like after those 2, a third of those students didn't need that third referral piece. And so that was interesting to me, like looking at it, I'm like, wow, there's a handful that had like the 1 and the 2, but then there wasn't nearly as much that had the more than the 2 with that piece. And once again, that's quote unquote major, minors as well, like just grouped together. It's just any referral piece with it. 100% of our second graders felt like they're connected to one or more of their classmates. That's something to celebrate, that the kids feel like they're in class with people that they feel connected with, and friends and things like that. 96% of our second graders feeling connected to at least one adult. I don't have the exact number of what that would be, but I mean, we have about 120 students, so that's 3, 4-ish, maybe 5 students. So obviously something to make sure that we do connect with students and things like that. But even diving in deeper, once again, looking at the individual responses is a big piece with it of, okay, what is the reason behind it and things like that. 97% of our second graders feel positive, that they have positive ways to calm themselves when they feel nervous. That one was kind of interesting looking at it, actually, when I looked at it compared to the other schools, and like our younger kids felt like they had ways to calm themselves, but then as they got older, apparently they lost that ability a little bit, because I did notice that the other schools, like it was a lesser number, and so it's just kind of interesting to see that maybe it's the fact that we highlight it more with the kids, and so it's on kind of the top of their mind things. But yeah, I was excited to see that 97% of the kids feel like they're able to kind of figure it out when they are struggling a little bit. For our Delta, 83.1% of our students were present more than 9% of the time. And so that's kind of that threshold, once again, that we were talking about for our attendance piece. And obviously if you're 90%, I mean, that's the 10% that they're gone, that's up to 18 days a year. So that's really, we want to make sure we're trying to get them there. That, I don't have the exact numbers from previous years, but it obviously had been tricky over the last few years and things like that. But that's a focus of trying to find that rhyme or reason. We've actually done some work as a district this summer around our attendance pieces, and we're continuing to do that work of, okay, when do we make these phone calls and things like that, reaching out to families, providing that support of digging in to figure out that why a little bit more, without being intrusive to the family, but is there a barrier that's in the way for the student getting to school, and trying to figure out what we can do as a school, as a district, to get students there. Obviously, we have the youngest learners, so they're not able to get themselves to school all the time, so it's really working with the families on those pieces.
Do you set parameters on that, like very structured parameters on?
When to
You know,
communicate and things
yeah.
like that's one of the things that we've been
Okay,
working on
you
this
really-
summer. And everybody kind of called it different things of like
Oh,
our 2-day, our 5-day, and then some people called it a medical letter and things like that. So that's the work that we're really clarifying
Okay.
this summer along the way. So
yeah,
yeah, just making sure that we're all
that
clear,
helps
like
when
if we
everybody's
say.
on the same page, yeah.
Correct,
Like-
yeah, not that a family,
Well, yeah, I mean-
The different school buildings, yet servicing the same age groups, but
We've consistent practices, we send letters home when kids hit 10 days absent, we send letters home when they've hit 2 unexcused days.
When it's kind of laid out in the student handbook, some of it,
Yep,
you know.
But then we're also, I think, communicating outside of that sometimes, supporting, cause I mean, they might not hit 10 absences until December, but if they've hit 5 of them in September, like, I wanna wait, like, so we'll have conversations about this, we meet once a month, I think every team does, I think it's pupil services team, principals about just looking at attendance data, like
Yeah.
who's had a bunch right now, and usually anecdotally, with the help of our admin assistants, we'll be like, oh yeah, they had strep throat, and that's why they were gone for 5 days, and we don't usually go much further with kids like that, but if it's like,
sure.
and they were gone 3 days, let's just see what we can do to support.
Mondays and Fridays or
Yeah,
things
but-
like things like that. I'm like, I wish I had that too, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's,
Right.
pretty,
Case by case,
yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
consistent,
But
well laid
consistent
out
still.
thresholds.
Yeah, true, okay.
Just a question on the reporting of the behavior. So from Shady Lane and Vet Franklin, you guys used it like the same standard guidelines to reporting? So your numbers here would be 2 or more. I just have a hard time, I'm sorry, to see 29 from Vet Franklin having over 100 more students. I just,
Well, and like I said, so, and that's where, I mean, on this, like, for reporting for this one, I mean, I can bring up the one or more than one, pieces with it.
I don't understand your question, Nina, what are you saying?
so like Ben Franklin's a larger school,
Yep.
more kids, so more issues, so I just have, you're reporting 41 and,
I'm
When his-
reporting
his-
41 that have more than one.
Yeah,
I get
So
the
that's
confusion
right.
now, he's
Yeah.
saying 29 that have 2 or more.
So, okay,
So we're
that's what I
we're
wanted
using
to see.
different thresholds
Slightly
here.
different.
Why? Good question. I mean, our goal on our scorecard is actually 5 or more, 90% of students should have less than 5 referrals. I don't know why I
So see,
didn't put that
looking
up
at
as
that
there.
is confusing instead of having the same.
I get it. I guess, I was just trying to put our reflection up there and not really concerned with comparing to a
Yeah,
different
I
school.
think it's how you're using the data with your team. Your focus at Shady Lane has been more than one, and at Ben Franklin, they were talking more than 2.
typically.
But I like to be able to have like consistent data with student and the guidelines. Cause looking at
I
So,
can tell you what we had, if you wanna compare to theirs, I can tell you
Yeah,
what
like-
ours was 2 or more.
I'm using standards.
I'm
and what
just-
No, I hear, yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
one of the things that at least we could make a note.
tell me more about what you mean by standard.
Well, like when you're reporting and giving us that update, that you're actually using the same standards in regards to when you're,
You want the
you know,
same
with
data
part
from
of
each
it.
school.
Yeah, that way it's apples to
saying, like,
apples.
so it's apples to apples, cause here, I just think that they were using the same guidelines and here's, 41 versus 29 students.
Well, and I mean, I'll take responsibility for that piece, like we
Oh, no,
were,
no,
no, I'm just saying, but I'm just
yeah.
saying, we were creating these or whatever and pulling
Yeah.
from the same thing, and it was just one of those things that we're looking for pluses and deltas and
Yeah.
things like that, and so I was like,
Gotcha.
oh wow, it's really interesting to see that we did, like I said, it was 45 is what it
Okay.
was for that, off the top of my head.
Mhm.
And so I saw that, hey, a third of those students after that second time, they didn't need a third referral of any means,
22 for Shady Lane.
Oh,
Had more than
That's, I
2.
mean,
then
for the
that
size of the school.
Okay, so then that,
See,
the
then
apples
that
to
makes
apples
more
makes more sense.
sense to me,
Yeah.
okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah, once again, yeah.
Pick a number, I can tell you, it might take me a while to count, but I can, whatever the threshold is.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Can we do
I
it?
guess the question would be just as a reflection for moving forward with this. is the goal, cause that, I don't think that was the stated goal. So is the goal to have
Don't
this,
look at me.
no,
like,
I'm just asking to make it simple for principals, because I think
Yeah,
we do have each school building their own scorecard, so they're setting metrics based on what they're working on.
that's
So
not
I
to
just-
compare them.
Right, so I just wanna be clear for when they come here, is the goal to
Okay,
have the
good point.
same data points so that we can compare schools, is that the goal? And we don't have to answer
Because where
now.
my mind goes, like when I read a case study, you know, like
Right.
science studies,
Right.
it has to be the same identical in order for me to be able to gauge.
Right.
I mean, do you guys
Well, what's
compare
working and what's
to each
not,
other?
right, or
Right,
if
so
there's
like, I
We're-
guess,
We're to answer that question, I mean, we're constantly talking about our
Yeah.
doing, but
Yeah.
not
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 to the, not to
competing
the, not to
of
the.
like how many you
no,
have compared to you have. I put a point up there of a point of celebration with
Yeah.
behavior, Dave did the same, is the different number. I mean, it depends on the audience, if you're wanting something
'Cause
that
they're
you
very
compare
different
the
schools,
exact
right?
same threshold, we can do that, but
yeah, that's
Um,
just a different way of asking that, we'll just approach the report differently,
Or
I
if,
guess.
yeah, or if there's
So if it's-
specific ones that you, like, we could come up with
True.
there might be some that we want these three things the same, and then the others that
Still
we might take our
provide
liberties
plus.
on.
That's helpful,
Yeah.
because for me,
Just
just
great
flat
successes we
glossing
have
and
and things like
glancing over, it's
Yeah,
just.
for sure, I
Makes
think
Now
sense.
that makes more sense, once I get the additional information.
alright, great.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we're
Thank you.
still
Got one
almost.
more
Oh, I got one more, I
slide.
got one more. Once again, very similar to Shady Lane's work, as a
Mhm.
district focusing on that, early literacy, component, as well as a curriculum review, and those pieces have been ongoing as well as like throughout the summer here. We have a lot of different staff members that have been in throughout the summer to dive into that work. The small group model has been something, once again, that we did last year, focusing on making sure that we consistently have similar instructional practices within the classrooms, and being purposeful and planned, so when you have your small group, it's not just, hey, I wanna pull these three kids just for the sake of pulling them, you have a game plan for it and things like that, and how people are able to figure out who to pull and providing that support for staff members so that they have an easier way to plan and support their students along the way. As well as peer observation, so that teachers have the ability to observe each other and see the work or hear about the work that's going on in different classrooms. It's one of those things that they don't get to do very frequently, and so being able to see how somebody else teaches is very beneficial to them. And that goes along with like our PLC work as well. And so talking with our grade level teams as well as the whole school staff, having similar focuses as well as just talking about the work that we're doing and having the data to kind of drive those conversations. And then once again, our SEL work is work that we've done this year in big things similar to Shady Lane, and the focus on just the reflective practices, and so conversations that you're having with the students. How did it go? What can we do better? Things like that with the students. That's the big focus for our conversations. And once again, revisiting and clarifying our expectations. Like we said, we're just kind of making sure that we're all on the same page of what we expect. To go along with the reflective practices piece, the whole BS staff is doing the de-escalation training to start the school year here, and so that's one of the pieces of it. And just kind of refresher on it. Many of the teachers and staff members have taken that course, or they've taken something similar to it, but it's just another piece that we're having just to focus on when the student is in that moment. How do we handle conversations and things like that, or how do we handle that piece? It's not the hands-on part of it, it's the de-escalation part of it, so
What's that training called?
I believe it's that nonviolent crisis intervention, right? Is it?
Probably,
Yeah, there's so many different acronyms with it,
There's a large part of that is de-escalation training, so.
But so that's actually going to be provided by two of our program support teachers, who are, they've had experience with de-escalation with actual students and things like that, but they've also been trained as trainers from the organization, so it's great that we have that as a in-district resource to support our teachers and things like that.
Is the one I'm familiar that I did some research on, the MANT, but that doesn't apply to younger kids, that's only older
Right,
kids.
yeah, we don't
So I
use
don't
that
think
as
we
our
use
training here. It's the
It's
non-
not
that
really
for older
crisis
kids?
prevention,
Okay.
that they go through, and some places call it like CPI training, some call it nonviolent crisis
I mean, the-
prevention.
First time we've done this?
Maybe for a whole
Using
staff, I don't know if that's the first time I mean, I had done it when I was a teacher over at Valley View, and so many of the people, at least historically, they were on like the support teams and things like that, and so they'd be people who might respond if a student needed that support, but we're doing it with our whole staff. And once again, it's not the whole training where you go through restraints and those
And it becomes
pieces.
like a certified trainer, but it's just like, here are the tools you can use in your
Yep, and so a
classroom.
lot of it's like conversation,
Yeah,
body language that you have with the student, reading the student and things like that. So really just helping staff feel more comfortable to support a student
Sure.
when they are struggling in that piece. So that way they just build their capacity within that piece. And ideally that would help not have situations get to levels where you do need a team to respond and things like that.
Right.
One of the other parts that Justin, the new principal, and myself have been talking with our SEL team is about kind of reframing our work as a community within Ben Franklin. So that's why we have the We Are BF is the piece that we're kind of rebranding a little bit this year and refocusing on that part of our culture, our
School
climate,
spirit.
our school, exactly, in that piece. And so putting that emphasis on that piece for students, staff, families, and everybody included. So really bring that piece to the forefront.
Nice.
So,
Was the de-escalation training specifically only just special ed before? And then now it's, or has it always been?
All of special ed and a few other people as well.
Correct.
And now for the first time, it's all staff.
At least at Ben Franklin, that's my understanding of it, yeah. And I mean, and once again, the trainers for it were trained within this last school year for it as well, and so we have the capacity to do it now, which I don't know if that was always historically there.
You need to have it in every building, don't you think?
I know,
I'm just throwing it out there.
So usually it's a 2-day training.
Yeah, if you could do the whole
If you do
piece
the
of
whole
it,
thing, it's a 2 full day training, and then the actual companies that do it are usually like you have to either do it when the staff is not already scheduled to work,
Right.
or you can only send a few people at a time because you need subs. So usually one day is the actual like restraint training for people who would actually be your first responders to a situation that may require a safe restraint. And then usually those people go to the 2-day where it's restraint, and then the second day is de-escalation. But then for a lot of your just regular staff that aren't that tiered responder, they just go to the de-escalation training, but it's still one day.
Okay.
So it's the kind of thing that's hard to do. You know, it's hard to get everybody at the same time to it, but usually over the course of a year, you're trying to get as many key people as you can to it, and then obviously having our own in-house trainers helps. But it's a pretty significant training, with time and what you learn, and so I think the goal with People Services now with having Marissa and Alec train was to start rolling it out, and I think they made a choice of where to start.
They saw that I was working there still, and they're
They're
like,
like, oh my god, Jay's there. So we better get this train done. But no, it's like, you know, there's time, there's cost, and there's all of that. So I think you just slowly try to get as many people through over the course of a year as you can. And this is the first year that I've heard that it's being rolled out at this level of capacity, at this level.
We did do the manual installation, full staff, all the principals did the training, we trained to be trainers, we did the training a few years ago. Not the physical part, because we don't need nor want everybody doing it, only a select few, so. But I've done the CPI, the nonviolent crisis handling, in several years and practiced putting adults on holds,
Yeah, I've
which is a
done,
lot different than a.
not here, but I went through the CPI training before, so for the 2-day CPI training a few years ago, and I mean, it's very valuable training, but it is extensive and intense, so.
Do you have to kind of like recertify for that? or-
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine, just like anything, yeah.
Years, as I recall.
Mhm. Especially on the
Everything
restraint
else.
side,
Yes.
correct, you wanna make sure that
Skills
you
check
are
off.
so whoever is
doing
on,
that the correct way
Yeah.
if you unfortunately have to.
has ever been
So,
tapped to
yeah.
be a part of that
There's laws
work,
might change
they're getting
That's
certified.
I mean, that's what we do too, restraint training certification every year, but we don't use them. ever, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You don't wanna use them, right?
The goal is
It's
not
not
to-
about
Yeah, exactly,
it.
that's the goal, it's always insurance.
Yep.
You have it when you, as a tool, if you need it. So very good, well, thank you, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. It was very informative and we're really looking forward to the next school year.
We'll be back-
When you
we'll be back
report
no
again in
time
September, I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding.
No, but I promise we will see you before next August,
Yeah.
so you will not
Yeah.
have to do your 23-24 presentation.
You're really zipping ahead, aren't you?
Yeah, no, 23-24 is what's coming next. I
Oh,
did
boy.
spend time today talking about 24-25, so.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Too early.
yeah, well,
So
very
awesome,
good.
Thank you.
So you guys are free to go if you want.
Yeah, so enjoy your evening,
Yeah.
thank you.
Get well, the getting's good, no.
Get a reading. Oh, it's Leah, well then yes, my popcorn.
She's very entertaining.
Thank you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Book exchange night at Shady Lane tonight, so our last
Oh.
one this summer.
I've been
Popsicles.
following some of that, like,
Popsicles and
nice.
chocolate, everybody wants a
When you had all
popsicle.
the books out, they could come check them out and stuff, what a great idea. Do you do that, did you do that last year? Or is it kind of a new, like, literacy kind of?
We've done it for many years.
Really?
Of
Oh,
course,
well, you
some
have?
breaks like we had with COVID, but yeah, cause I mean, at the younger levels, kids, we want kids in level
Oh my
reading,
gosh.
level readers
Yeah.
at their age, so we do that.
So great.
The library's great, we always point them towards the library too, but it's nice for them to have level books, we send some home at the end of the year and have a couple
That's great,
exchange nights throughout the summer, so.
that's
And the
awesome.
weather has cooperated every time, so.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, you don't want that.
Big difference, but.
It's nice to get books outside, for some reason it might seem funner, more
Yes,
fun.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funner, funner. I almost said funner. But I goof around with my patients and talk like that once in a while. Funner. Okay, so we're moving along, supplemental curriculum materials, review of policies and procedures, forms, and parent communication for policy 361 and 871. I did read that right?
I think so,
I didn't have my glasses on.
It took us a while to write it and make sure we got everything
It's,
included in there.
Yep, and it's there. And there we go.
There,
All right.
so, I think we've got everything included there.
Yeah,
And just want to know what pieces you would like to talk through, I think,
Okay.
at this point, unless
Yeah,
there's
at this
anything
point, right?
particular.
Yeah, so
to come.
I made the changes from last week.
she volunteered to come.
I
Yeah, she was all good. This is her baby. This is partly her baby.
Like I said, I'm gonna do it Monday, so I just wanna make sure I'm in the loop.
True,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I don't miss anything. So the part that I did was the policies and procedures. And I updated what we talked about in the last meeting to this meeting. And I sent it out to the full board on Friday, just so they had a little extra time before Monday. Because we are going to be requesting discussion and action on Monday, so that we're prepared with staff communications before opening week on the 28th. So, I mean, anything that we do today would be minor, so they have the sense of it all now. So on policy 361, in the materials included in the scope, I added classroom library, so it was more specifically stated. And then I brought up that 360 that I forgot to, it like snuck onto the second page and I missed it, so
And then policy.
policy 360, which is the oh, it's got some weird title, auto video material
AV,
policy, yeah.
Yeah, audiovisual,
So-
yeah.
For whatever reason, that was like in my formatting, it didn't make it up, so it got back up. So it's just the reference to that policy, because audiovisual materials have their own policy that covers them in much more detail, so it really wasn't a whole lot on the policy one.
Yep.
Just some clarification, and that other thing should have been in there, anyway, that was just my error. So the procedure, and I think I think Amy will bring up some
Yes,
things,
I have a
you had
question.
some additional things there, but
Yes.
I just did what I thought was okay. So, on page 1, we put classroom libraries in there as well to make sure it's a part of the conversation, not just assumed. Book looks got made number 2. I felt like this was in alphabetical order, so I just made it in alphabetical order.
Where's classroom libraries? Why can't I see it? Is it right?
So it's in that sentence.
Right here.
It's the third line.
Just before the list?
Oh, sorry, I was looking up on top.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yep, so I didn't do anything to the top.
Yeah,
That was
okay,
already there.
right, right,
So classroom library, and unfortunately I couldn't change, I mean, at least I couldn't figure out how to change the track changes color.
oh,
So that's why it's all red. And then I just decided there weren't that many, so I wasn't gonna futz with the highlighting, which added even more comments on the side, so. So the classrooms are there, the book looks is now the new number 2 and it renumbered itself automatically. Then I just took rid of that stupid strike through that was on page 2 at the top up there, which is, I don't know, was a hangover. Then we got down to the communication. And so I'll just say what I did and then we can talk about it, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, what did I do? I know I did
it's all
something.
blur.
I know I did something because Amy was like, we gotta talk. It's not how she said it,
It's not
it's
bad.
just
No.
how I decided to interpret it.
Yeah.
So she said it very nicely, so I'm pretty sure the bulk of it was at that last.
Oh.
Yeah.
At that last one.
Yeah.
Where we talked
Yeah.
about all communications sent home about the above reading material should include information for parents about the process to have their child opt out from reading any specific material. So I'm pretty sure the other things are the same.
Go ahead, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, and I guess as I looked at this, every piece of it talks about secondary ELA.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if it would be worth labeling this communication for secondary ELA.
Yeah.
Because here's my concern about elementary, as we start to send this out and look at and having elementary teachers, especially ones who are teaching young kids and they're using books that are coming from an instructional source.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, remember that some of those books have like 5 words on a page, the purpose of them is early literacy. And even if we wanted to notice parents all of those books, that's a lot of books, and they're not what we call trade books. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later when I talk about the forms. I think really what I hear your concern about is about trade books. They're books that are commercially available, you can find them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and we're bringing them in to use in instruction. Those books that most of our elementary teachers are reading with kids are not trade books. They're not designed for a mass audience, they're designed, and sometimes we buy them in bulk packages of many small books. And they're not something that a parent could look up on BookLooks or any of those other sources. They're not reviewed because they're not trade books. So as I started to go down this kind of rabbit hole of how is an elementary teacher going to implement this, when they're not using trade books, it's going to be very difficult because a parent can't look that book up, Johnny went to the zoo or whatever the book is, that we're using for reading. And I didn't get the sense that was our initial purpose anyway, because those are instructional books. So as people are starting to have conversation around this policy, that was something that came up. Well, I teach 2nd grade intervention, how am I going to notice, make sure parents know about all these books, because I go through them pretty quickly with kids, and I said, I don't think that's the intent.
Because that wasn't
Right,
okay.
so I think labeling this communication of
Oh, yeah, it's just,
secondary
yeah.
ELA
Yeah,
book, however, supplemental materials would,
for secondary level or something like
yes,
that.
that
So the
will,
1 through 4 point will just be specifically secondary,
yeah,
and just put it at that
and
makes
just
sense.
put it in the title
Oh,
there
yeah.
where it says
Yeah.
communication of supplemental materials, and then I won't have any
I mean,
parent
that's what we
elementary-
interpreted it as.
Right,
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
but not, as people are starting to read this, not everybody's interpreting it that way.
Yeah,
And
well,
so I was
I
like,
get it, but that's good, I mean,
Clarification,
Yeah.
I think it's-
And so
Makes
I,
but that's good because,
That makes sense.
yeah, we need that
and
feedback.
so when I started to do the form, then I labeled the form as, this is for trade books. Books that are commercially available, those are what we want to review in this way. If we find a book that a commercial publisher or an educational publisher has created for elementary, for the purpose of instructing reading, and it's got some sensitive
Wow.
content in it, that's a
Wow.
different
That's a
conversation that
whole
we
different
should
conversation.
have.
Sure.
I
You never
haven't
know.
seen
I
that in
don't know
29
what
years,
Right,
so, but that's a whole different conversation,
Yeah.
and we will absolutely have that conversation,
When
and
a lot
it's
of those
not a
books are
problem.
like you know, you see carryover too, they're in the library, some of them are in the library,
Sometimes they
you
might
know,
be in the
they
library,
can be,
but they,
yeah.
but most often they're in our book room.
Right.
And then teachers are pulling
But I
them
mean, not the trade
for-
books, like the,
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, the trade,
the-
wait,
the
which
trade
one's the
books will be in the
books? Are
library.
commercially like ones?
Yeah, they're the ones you could buy on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and that you can search.
Right, exactly.
The instructional, really curriculum materials, and in some ways they're considered core curriculum, but
Mhm.
they're not coming to you because we're using them in such bulk, so in that regard, they're supplemental, so it's
Yeah.
kind of this
Yeah,
weird-
no, it's definitely
piece.
secondary
Okay.
level and,
Then I
yeah.
think we're in a good place,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just wanted
I
to
feel
make
like
that.
those
major
things where
And that- Leo,
it
you
picks like a
pointed that out,
topic
yeah.
that like these are the kinds of words that kids struggle with if they have this
Right,
thing. And then the book has like a couple pages where those words are like,
Yeah,
you know,
Exactly.
they're a lot.
and we're
I have a lot
reading
of
them for
Yeah.
basic comprehension and fluency and vocabulary
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
decoding, we're not reading them for those kinds of essential understandings that we are at the high school, we're not analyzing them the same way, so. Okay, as long as we're on the same page, I think
Yeah, that's a great
we're
suggestion,
good.
thank you.
good there.
I just had a couple questions. I noticed here that we did add and book genres.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, back on the front side of the procedure. How are the books chosen? How are the books chosen how do the teachers choose the books that the children can choose?
So I think it depends on what the starting point is. So I think what I can speak to for sure is how we will go forward is we will be looking at what standards are we trying to hit and how are we making sure we have a broad range of reading throughout a course.
Cause I think that we had talked about in the last meeting, there was like 36 books on the list or something. And is that a lot?
On
Is
just
that
one list.
normal?
Yeah, that seems to me like a lot. And I think part of my question that I still need to investigate as we come back to school and start addressing these things is more deeply, is how many copies of each book do we have so
Right.
that we can, because we can have a shorter list if we have more copies of each book.
Sure,
But
that
we
makes
need to
sense
have
too.
a longer list if we have, I only have this many of this book and this, so I need to make sure I have at least one for each kid. kind of
Okay,
a
and that
situation.
might have been
That-
what created
In
that.
case
I
it's a
think
long
that's
smaller,
list
then
is-
you have to get a few more.
Then we're
like,
gonna have to add to it,
yeah.
so,
Okay.
yeah, so I think
Unless
that's
the
part of
teachers
the
rotate
conversation.
the list and then they can share the books.
Right, so
yeah.
but I would at least need to have it for my group of kids.
Yeah.
So however they do that, my guess is that is part of the conversation, but moving forward, our conversation needs to be
How are we
what
choosing
are
the
the
books?
standards
What are the
and
standards,
how
yeah.
are we addressing those standards with these books and also giving kids a range of experiences? Unless it's like at the high school where we have that mystery and suspense class,
Sure,
gonna be
then
a certain
that's
kind of genre.
clearly,
but over the
Mhm.
course of a school year, I should be reading a variety of text types
and not that I think that we should micromanage what kids can choose, cause you do want it to be entertaining, but obviously it's school, so you want it to be educational.
Yeah, it has to
Well,
tie
you
to the
kind of
standard.
like, yeah.
So are
you
we,
tie it to
so
the
do
standards, very
the
true.
teachers have like a percentage for each category or each genre that they are asked to present to the students?
No, not at this time.
Okay, is that
It
something
might be
that
not
we-
something on here, but maybe that's something to.
I think
I
that would
don't-
be
I
in the
mean, do we wanna
development
look
of
into
our core curriculum as we look at these new standards and start to make some tweaks.
Right,
One of the pieces that we need to look at is kind of the vertical alignment. What are they doing in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and how, and into high school, and what is that student's experience over the course of the experience? Are they having multiple opportunities to read certain kinds of books and being exposed to different types of
Sure.
materials over time?
then
So I
is-
don't know that it's a percentage, like in this course you have 2 books necessarily. I think but they're over the course of the experience, it should be a robust experience. Does that
right.
make sense?
So then, and again, I'm sorry, I'm kind of new to all of this conversation too, but like, so is there, when teachers look at what a student is choosing, let's say, they're choosing young adult genre every book choice,
True.
is that something that they allow the children to do, or they say, hey, you know, you chose this genre this time, we would like you to choose something off of a different list, or do they just let the children choose what they want through the whole?
I think there's a balance. I think sometimes you'll have conferring conversations with students around what they're reading and choosing and exploring new genres, but you also, particularly for your reluctant reader, want to make sure that they're reading, and if
Sure.
that's what they're willing to pick up at this point.
Right. And I understand too, we're talking about
So-
supplemental
Right,
material, so this isn't the core,
right.
you know, the core curriculum would cover all. At some point, I was just kind of curious as to how that is implemented in the classroom and what that looks like.
I mean, we're looking at that middle school example pretty much, but as you get into high school, it's supplemental, well, it's not even supplemental, it's like core literature,
It becomes part of the,
like
when they,
core
yes,
books.
like when I look
Yeah.
at tenth grade, I was
Yep.
looking at tenth grade honors English, and Of Mice and Men was the
Yep.
summer reading, so they're
Mhm.
coming into the year with that.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that is something that, you know,
Right.
again, not to say, again, there's that opt-out provision, but
Yeah.
the majority of the class is reading that as a core
Right.
text. So that's a little different than those
Yeah.
choice books that they've got when they're doing kind of those book club things,
Right. Okay.
book club
Yeah,
things, it's
specifically
more
that
official than that.
class, my daughter was in it, she had a lot of classics.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Awesome. I was at Allison, yeah, classic. She did a good job.
That's great.
Some of them do that,
I think Amy and I agreed
Yeah.
that this is a work in progress.
Yeah,
And that we understand that there are concerns,
Mhm.
and I feel like teachers were doing the best they could with the resources they were offered. And we
True.
had some funds that were very tightly controlled for their use. And so I think everyone's on the same page.
Especially
I
with
think
the new
this is-
standards.
Yeah,
moving
this is
forward
the
and-
ideal time
Yeah.
to have these
Yeah,
conversations
okay.
and say
Yeah.
we need to make some
Yeah.
make some tweaks. Are we 100% gonna get there unit by unit this year? Honestly, I don't think so, but we're gonna do our best to get as close as we can, and knowing that next year will be even better. And I know, I just,
But that's okay.
yeah.
I mean, I
So-
guess if a teacher feels they have to put out disclaimers like that,
Right, well,
then
then
maybe
I,
it'll make them rethink some of the choices, but
absolutely, I
yeah.
think that's part of the
I won't go
conversation,
there,
so.
I won't go there.
So I think the conversation, and I'll know better once teachers are back and I've had a chance to talk with them, I've had
Yeah.
a chance to talk with a few. But that's a piece that we'll really get into, and there will be opportunities to have I think some really good conversation and more feedback from parents and through
Mhm.
opt-out and that communication that
Right.
we're gonna be sending home. So I think we'll be in a good place. It
Okay.
is going to be a work in progress. We will not be in a perfect place.
I just feel
And
like
so-
it's,
I
I
think
think,
ever though, I think it's gonna.
No, it's
Yeah.
gonna
It'll
evolve.
be better, and I think teachers were very pleased to have the standards adopted and to have that
Yes.
framework and structure to work
Right.
in. And I think it does help people have kind of those guideposts, those
Yep.
railings to the work
Mhm.
and naturally provide structure
Mhm.
around it and good conversations, so.
Yeah, I
and-
think it's good to have those guardrails, I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
And
go ahead.
and to Amy's disadvantage, not only is this stuff already decided the year before
Right,
the year
exactly, yeah,
that it's gonna happen, she then also came into it mid-year of that year.
Okay.
So, there is a lot of work to do, but unfortunately, in a role like this where you're determining curriculum for a school year, you're actually doing that way
Yeah.
earlier.
Again, like I had conversations today about 24 and 25, what
Yeah.
that'll look like. So we're
So,
Yeah.
moving
I mean, I think to the team's credit, they've done a lot of serious work already to just have happening in 23, 24, which is great, and I think people are excited about, some of this work. But realistically, usually now we are talking about 24, 25, not 23, 24.
yeah, of course.
And so I think they've made a lot of great work, and, unfortunately, we put the department in a situation where you already would have naturally inherited, when you start in July, and then,
and I missed the fall where I could have started some of this.
and then
work.
we just, brought Amy in, second semester, so I personally feel like we understand the issues and concerns and people are happy to be working in the standards and to be building that curriculum along with supplemental materials. And I'm pretty impressed with the work that they've already been able to do, given that school districts actually work on this odd timing. Like district administrators, we don't think about the year we're in.
Mhm.
We're thinking about the year that's coming. Everybody else is living the year that they're in, and
Wow,
we're in the
yeah.
next year. So I
That's
think
a
it's been
good point,
impressive
yeah.
work, and
And I'm really pleased with the investment I've seen so far with, and I've got more coming in the next couple of weeks as they finish up, but we invested a lot in summer curriculum work this year. I have more happening almost, I'm gonna say 3.5 times or something like that, what we did last summer, in the amount of hours that I couldn't fund everything that was
Yeah,
requested.
right.
So the bulk of it went to early literacy, the K-12 ELA
That's good.
standards, the science adoption to help them get set up for that, the continuous improvement kind of rethinking piece that we'll be talking about in a couple weeks. So some really heavy duty work happening this summer, so
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the communication piece on the secondary part there, I just, like, the examples that popped up that kind of fueled some of this, I think it just adds that extra layer of communication that wasn't necessarily there, that literally like helps to close the loop between the teacher, the student, and the parent. And that way the parent is like involved, you know, they're involved in the conversation. Oh, well, this book is about this? Okay, well, let's talk about this, you know, what are you learning about it? Oh, well, that's not so right, so then the parent can kind of provide those guardrails too, like if they want them to learn it or not. And I mean, I think it's just better for their education all around, have that parent in the loop.
Yeah, and it helps support them at home. I just have, sorry to go back to this, Amy, but I have one more question for you. And again, just trying to understand, like, for the teaching aspect of it, for the genres, is there a requirement or an outline for what they offer the kids? Like, I don't know if I'm asking this question correctly. So let's say we have all these genres and the book list is 12 long, do you have like 3 of each type or whatever? Does every teacher have that wide range of options? Or do they kind of build their own list?
So within the grade level
Mm-hmm.
and the course, so 8th grade ELA, my understanding of how it's been set up is that every teacher is working from the same set of like core books.
Choices, yeah.
Okay,
So if I'm in, this is Alva Garcia's class, during unit 2, I have the same book options as I would in Ms. Scotter's class.
okay,
So there's consistency there, so those
Sure.
teachers have worked together on that. Now, that's not to preclude an individual teacher from making a particular choice to teach a particular lesson or topic.
Sure.
But based on the needs of the student, but overall, the course outline is the same.
okay,
And that's how we will be setting it up moving forward.
right, just that consistent and then the students are able to kind of choose within that, but they don't, they're not forced into one genre or the other. And yeah, I'm just kind of just learning how it all
I
works
think
out.
I think it depends
you
on
for
what the
Answering all
course
the,
purpose, or what that particular unit's purpose is.
correct, okay.
If it's a mystery unit and that's the focus and we're talking about how authors develop, thank you, that's the word I was looking for. Then you might have a choice of mystery, you're gonna have a choice for mysteries, but that
Sure.
would depend on what standard they're working
They're
to.
working toward, okay, that makes sense, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna harp on communication one more time on this part. I
Okay.
got 2 things and that's it. I'm probably gonna shut up for the rest of the meeting. No promises. Do we want to say electronically sent, cause we were talking about
Yes.
email? Okay.
I think that
Well,
was a different thing, Amy.
Or-
yes, so I can show you, I did not get a chance to do a full sample, but I
Oh.
did
Oh, a
start making
sample.
some notes.
Okay. Oh, that's right, cause we were gonna do that.
Yeah, and so I had some conversation with some folks, which was really helpful. And now I have to find where this is, I thought I saved.
Yeah, that might help then, we'll look at that,
And it's just a starting point that I have shared with nobody but Leah, so
Okay, yeah.
here we go. Communication for EO, the
Those kids are
secondary.
so cute, those are new
Those are
pictures.
pictures.
Oh,
They're
So cute.
I mean,
Yes!
I was logging on.
Amy was
and
working
there
on
are
it
pictures
last
on there.
week.
I know, how excited.
Look at
I know
those
Amy was
sweet
working on
faces.
it, yeah.
That was great, I love all the red.
I know.
That's
Must be
awesome.
Valentine's.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, I think that was Valentine's Day.
That's cute.
Mm.
This is not nearly as cute.
And back
These
to
are
the
just my
communication.
notes. Again, this is just a starting point. And I actually have an ELA teacher at the high school who wanted to give more thought around this too and contribute. So I was like, great, I wanna hear what you've done
Mhm.
before, what works. I think that's super. So I said communication must be emailed to parents. It can be emailed using PowerSchool
Mhm.
because emails do come through that way, but parents must be able to access attachments without logging into something else. And that sounded very doable. So within your communication, you need to be explaining the units that are covered within the time frame that you're communicating for, including the timeline, text being used, including short stories or articles that are planned ahead. Again, we have that kind of 2 class period piece
Outline.
if they wanna do something spur of the moment. Identify the unit start date and giving parents ample time to review materials and communicate and opt out. So I left ample. I don't know if we wanna quantify that, but the first week of school, I don't want people to have to
No.
wait a ton of time either, so I'm like, part of me is like, let's see how it goes and we can tighten it
Yeah,
up if we need to.
Or you probably speaking in teacher lingo, but it's communicate opt-out option, or is that, okay.
Yeah. So making sure they list each book, title and author, books containing profanity, sexual content, sensitive topics must have a specific disclaimer. And I gave an example right there.
Okay,
Parents are encouraged to read reviews of the books. Reviews can be found at sites such as.
okay.
I took off, there were 2 things from our original list. I think one was library media specialist and the other was something else that didn't scholarly
it's like a
journals or
scholarly-
something. I was like, that's not relevant. So
Do we- should we
did have
put the
some core
websites?
people who
Yeah.
use,
Oh, go ahead.
like they use journals.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
so I
like
was
the
like,
sciencey people.
that's not
Yeah.
a parent friendly
That's not
thing to
parent-
say.
No, but should we,
Oh,
like, you
yeah.
wanna put the
To link the
links in
actual
it, can they
websites
put the
there?
links in it? Or just at least the website spelled out, because if you
They
like
can,
start with
yeah.
just like
Oh,
the
yeah.
word, you might not search it right,
So,
I don't know.
yeah. I can certainly do that. I just didn't for my
Well, I know,
example
and it
today.
was just like, I appreciate this looks nice,
So, and then here's the statement I've come up with thus far.
okay.
In accordance with policy 334, parents' rights in the curriculum, and policy 341, teaching about controversial issues, no student will be required to read a book or view instructional materials. Because this is directly from
Right.
that, if his
That's
or her
nice.
parent, guardian has objections for more religious or political reasons, whenever possible, substitute materials will be provided. If you would like to discuss an alternative book for your child, please contact
That's
me
very
at
nice. I love it,
nice.
it
Yeah.
is, and I think
I like it.
that will
Very
just
well
go
yeah,
everywhere. And we had talked about doing a Google form for opt-out, and I would prefer, I think, to start with having the parent email the teacher,
okay,
because it starts a conversation.
oh,
And I
okay,
think that's ultimately what we want parents and
Mhm.
teachers to be having.
Yeah.
I also had some fear of a parent,
not
maybe not getting to it right away,
Yeah.
which is understandable. Hello.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
is for taxes,
Downstairs.
huh?
Oh, wait, I think they're.
Might be around the corner.
Around the corner.
Around the
Okay.
corner for the
Yeah.
Board review.
Okay.
Different room.
No taxes here.
Yeah, no. We'll take them, but.
We'll take it, but.
Yeah, but my concern about the Google form was it could create a missed opportunity because a parent fills something in maybe a little later than what the teacher was expecting and they're not checking the Google form and now we have a student who maybe inadvertently gets a book. So,
And I do like how it opens conversation.
So I'd like to offer that as a starting point, and then if we need to quantify it or manage it in a different way, move to that. So the parent and the teacher to be having connecting
Yeah.
around the alternative
Mhm.
material.
For me, that's all on you,
Okay.
I think whatever is at this point the easiest for the teacher and what they feel that,
Yeah, and if
but
they
the
decide the
connection
Google
with
form
the-
works for them,
yeah,
I think
like if they have a
that
whole
can-
list they
can
wanna,
work,
like-
Cause we're really looking for that opt-out, not
Yeah.
necessarily that opt-in for this
yeah, opt out,
particular
right.
piece,
Yes,
we're just looking
yes.
for the opt-out. So
right,
something I can talk to him about, but as I started thinking about that a
But I
little
like
more, I
that a
was
lot.
like, oh, I think this,
And it does,
Maybe.
Well,
yeah, it
it's making-
outlines everything for the parent, it makes it easy to understand and then easy to contact the teacher if they have concerns.
and that could be a hyperlink there too, just like
Mhm. And I think
Thanks.
it'll just there'll be some thoughtful review of the books.
Yes, I,
And then, I mean, and eventually this might even need, at some levels, might not even need to be sent out.
Well, and I think one thing that this does too is it gives the parents
Push it when
the
I send it
understanding that they know now what to do.
But if it doesn't have
Because
that.
sometimes parents don't even know that they
Yeah.
can.
all I have to do is email
Opt out,
the
or
teacher
all I
and
have to do
say,
is-
hey, could
I
we
think
talk
we
about
should
an
always
Plus
alternative?
alternative book, yep.
But it's always
And
good to have.
it
always
sounds
good to
like
have.
Yeah.
in
Because it
many
covers us.
cases, I don't know
Yeah.
so much about middle
Yeah.
school, cause I haven't gotten deep into those conversations yet, but at the high school, they typically have an alternative book in mind.
Yeah,
So, you know,
well, like
and
I said,
again,
I was gonna, I didn't want her reading and she's kinda like, I'll just skim it, I'll just. She's graduated now, so I can let the secrets out, but I'm like, fine.
so this is as far as I've gotten, and I don't know if there's
So
anything
far,
else
so
you wanna
good.
add to it.
I like it a lot, yeah,
But
as long as we add like, the
I can add the
websites,
hyperlinks, yeah,
or hyperlinks, it's even
I
better.
can definitely do that.
And then but do we wanna put that in the procedure though, that we're adding the sites in that procedure?
Yeah, I
So it
think
doesn't
that's
get lost in
That's
translation?
up to you.
Cause I mean, you're doing it, but maybe we should put it in procedure, saying that, citing that.
Citing what? I'm sorry.
That you're
That-
including review sites
Oh.
in the communication.
Oh, in that last section.
Oh, okay, that's.
Secondary.
I was trying to look
I
at
thought,
Like in here.
In
here. Cause it's not spelled out in here, but I mean, we do it, but yet maybe we wanna keep it consistent. And then I'm done. I'm gonna hold you to it.
Yeah, so
Just
you're saying
saying.
that it's being sent home
7:02 p.m.
with the opt-out,
I
but
know,
you're saying
right?
that it should include
No,
Just teasing you.
I beat this
Okay.
thing
the links
enough.
or
I beat this
or
Are
one
you
like
talking about
options,
editing
yeah.
number 4 then, Chris?
I don't know, like wherever you think it would go,
I would
like
think number
including like Leah knows how to work her magic, like come on Leah.
So we're looking for something as well as the list of book review sites.
Yeah,
Our dictionary.
yeah. And then do we wanna state like
Shall include
electronically
information
sent?
for parents about the process.
Because I think that's
Oh,
important, like the paper stuff
electronic
really
list.
doesn't work for secondary level.
Yeah, it's gotta be electronic, I think.
So reading
Sent out to parents, guardians,
will be electronically
electronically.
sent out, I mean, you can just squeeze that
I
word
was
in
gonna
there.
say, that could go in number 1 maybe.
Mm-hmm,
We sent out.
and disclaimer, each profanity, sexual content, any additional reason.
It's new.
Shall include information for parents about the process to have their child opt out and specific review sites to research the
I don't know.
book.
Well, or
Yeah.
should it be
I think the review site's
Oh,
number
and-
2.
or wherever,
the
yeah.
They include
you
our
figure out
not
where you
limited
want it?
to,
Should
so
it
let
be in the number 2 where it
Sure.
says that, you know, this
Oh, number
has a
2.
disclaimer, profanity, you know,
With
will include site.
a teacher will provide review sites
I
for
think
parent
it's
to
better, it's more in number 2, cause that's where,
yeah, wherever, I just think it should be consistent with what we're gonna do.
so you want something to include.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, then.
Include what?
Review sites,
Okay.
cause that's what they call it, right? Review sites or review, I can't figure out any other term for it. It says site, I go back to this section. Material review, yeah, material review,
List of
Okay.
material.
Oh, wait, we call that
websites,
selection.
material re-
The term there says selection aids may include but are not limited
Well,
to.
that's really
I
more
know.
for, the word selection aids is really more for teachers. It says prepared selection aids for book and other material I think it's like
It's pretty
book
straight,
reviews.
yeah,
I
book
think
review
selection aids-
sites, book
The
re- yeah,
parents aren't selecting, so selection aid is in there for the teachers, the thing we send home, I think.
Okay.
or even if it said
These-
material review websites, you know, because that's really what it is.
Yeah, I had sites, websites,
Thank you. I'm done now.
Review,
Did you
yeah,
put
it just
that in
said
the
reviews
minutes?
can be found
I'm
as.
Laura, put that in the minutes.
I have not,
Chris
it
does not have any more questions.
but it has a specific thing, so
Okay.
if Lee has questions or Amy has questions, I have
I
something to
know,
refer
I just like how you like
Because
clicked it
now I
really
have
hard.
my fifth version of this.
I know,
I
I
need to
can't.
make sure and I'm trying to figure out how to color code it for myself.
I can't keep track of.
I know.
which version
I
have
didn't print out
in
any more, I was just like, no more, I'm not printing.
Well, look at this.
I create my
I
own
know.
troubles, it's fine.
Curriculum, I have a folder per
Oh, no, I
meeting
know.
like that, I swear.
On these 2.
I know.
Alright,
Okay,
let's move forward.
is that any other discussion on that?
We're done, so we're
But, right, but I'm trying to be like, you know,
Yeah, for
Have everybody a
procedure
chance.
361, that is what I.
okay, alright, cool.
I'm good.
Cool beans, I like it.
I'm good.
So anything,
Okay, and then nothing changed in the other ones.
No,
There
yeah,
were no
so I'm,
changes from
yep,
the last meeting.
Yep.
And then you had your thing,
And I had my
and
input on
you
it.
you might have had another thing, but mine are done.
the evaluation form,
yeah, so I just had the evaluation form, that well, and I did two things, so let me make sure that I don't, okay, there's that one. Well, we'll start with this one, so this was the new one, supplemental materials request books. Form must be submitted to building administrator and approved prior to purchasing trade books for use in instruction. So again, those commercially available
I like it.
pieces, and so I think same information is up top or on the previous form, and then we just changed the criteria a little bit, that it's accurate and up to date, supports and enriches the curriculum or course standards and benchmarks. Age and grade level appropriate, I went ahead and left, and I think Dr. Christensen, you and I had some conversation about just that can mean emotional maturity level, learning style, you know, those kinds of things. And then free of offensive or questionable content. They said it aligns to the HG&B curriculum, sexually explicit content and profanity limits of the grade level of intended use. I have some capitalization issues there, but I'll fix that better to Monday. And then free of bias.
Nice.
And then the recommended grades, I think everything else is the same, I just took off the piece where it needed to be reviewed by the technology director, because none of this is
Oh.
technology.
Okay. Well, that checklist, I mean, that seems,
Yeah.
it hones in
Mm-hmm.
and it sings to what the policy and procedures.
My thought
Talk
process
about.
after reviewing that email was just so that in the event, like, let's just say a parent, contrary, is upset that a book got filtered out or weeded out, now we have tangible data to say, well, this is why, so it actually protects us and saves us from saying that we went through that vetting system and this is the exact reason why this book was not chosen or filtered.
Right, and I think that that's kind of the ultimate goal here though too, right, is to just standardize and have everything
Everybody on the same page, right?
well, and that it's supporting curriculum, I mean,
Yeah.
that's, it's designed to support curriculum, and that's kind of, you know,
I like
Yeah.
it.
I like
Very
that.
good. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You can't ask too many questions about it on Monday.
I won't. I'm just gonna sing praises a lot.
And then this one I did add, as I was doing the other one, to be submitted to building administration and approved prior to purchase of supplemental instructional materials, just to clarify when the different ones get used. And otherwise, I don't think this had any changes.
Sounds good. I like it.
And I imagine
Very
we'll
good work.
continue to tweak as we learn more and we use it in
Yeah.
practice, but this will get us started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
we limit it.
I looked at the
Right.
websites, I'll add them in.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'm gonna leave the word, like what's there, and then put
The website.
the website, cause some
Oh,
are obvious and some are not.
oh, true.
So I'm gonna leave from the list.
Yes,
And then next to it would be
Yeah,
the
the
hyperlink.
Yeah.
website, just because like Cooperative Children's Book Center is CCBC,
Oh, yeah.
education.wisc.edu.
Good point.
So like,
Yeah,
you don't really know what you're
No.
getting, so I feel like that word is important, but then like the other one is very obvious, like kirkusreviews.com. Okay, so
yeah, no, that
yeah, I
works.
think that
Okay.
that makes it easier
So I'll leave the
for
word,
parents.
just so you know, I'll
Yes.
leave the word
Alright.
and add the full website.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So we'll move on to survey then.
Yes.
Yep, the
Okay.
student engagement survey
Yes.
results.
Thank
Dun,
you.
dun, dun.
There we go. Alright, yes, and this will be short and sweet
Okay.
because
Eh.
it's a new survey this year. So typically, or last year, I did this once. Feels like so long. But when I did this last time, we were comparing previous years, so I had some kind of up and down and some trend data. This was a different survey with some similar questions and then some different questions, and all of the questions, the statements were written differently. So again, this comes from our partner, Studer Education, and they said you're starting a new baseline. So I did not really go back and compare anything from previous years. This will just start us fresh with a new
Okay.
piece. So it'll be quite a bit shorter than it has been in previous years.
And is that because you are changing the questions and the wording, and so it's kind of like you're getting
Yeah,
different
like,
results,
we're
can't really compare?
Correct, we don't know if the
It's
result
apples
is
and
because
oranges,
we
yeah.
asked the question in a slightly different way or there's a legitimate change, so.
Okay.
So that was their recommendation. Again, we did the survey back in April and students are asked a series of questions. We give it grades 1 through 12. First and second graders get some help in reading it aloud, and there are like pictures with smiley faces, et cetera,
Oh, okay.
that help. Actually, I think this year the smiley faces went to everybody, so
Oh,
you can decide how you
That's very
wanted
special.
to do it.
That works.
Yeah, so a scale of 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree. Again, they changed most of the wording and then they eliminated, we used to have some items that were specific to 5th, 8th, and 12th graders, just in transition. They did not include those anymore. So again, we didn't get to choose that, but I think some of the feedback I heard was those items weren't used as often or found to be as helpful.
Sure.
So anyway, that is that, and so this year's really, like I said, establishing that new baseline. But I did compare participation numbers because we've had, particularly with, again, COVID, had some changes in participation, so I wanted our participation was more normal last year, so I wanted to, more typical, not normal, typical. So I wanted to compare to 2023. So you can see by school, and the percent change in participation from one year to another. So, and there were a variety of reasons for
I wanted to ask Brad
participation.
about that.
I know,
Actually,
and
I
I
meant
don't
to
remember,
ask
I
him.
feel like there was,
I know, like,
again, this
why
was
is there
before I
such a
came, but there was
big
there was a
number?
reason, and I don't know, but I'm afraid I don't recall what it
was gonna
was
ask him.
particularly, so it was a 30% increase. Wonder if that was when you had to quarantine a class.
Yeah.
I don't know. That made me wonder.
2 classes.
Now that you said that, I don't know, cause it would be, that would be,
Yeah, right.
that could be the difference,
But in
so.
2022, well, I guess,
Spring after, yeah,
I'm glad
because I
had short-term memory
remember,
loss about those years.
what President Pelzer were telling me last year, cause I was like, oh, our numbers from 21 to 22 dropped, and he's like, we gave the survey in 2020 right after kids came back. They
Oh,
were
that's
so
right.
excited to be back, we
Yeah.
hit, first time highs, and then we got back to normal. So, yeah.
Wow.
But we did have a slight 1% increase overall from 2022 in participation. The only comparison I'm doing from one year to another is just as an FYI, the mean.
Yeah.
So the overall district mean this year was a 3.83. The 2022 mean was 3.97. Again, because we have new questions, we can't really determine exactly why. But again, one of the things that Studer teaches us is how to use these surveys and do a rollout process within the school to ask more questions, to maybe do a focus group, to dig deeper with our survey results. So that's something that we'll begin to find out as kids come back and teachers come back and principals start doing those rollouts. We'll be able to talk a little bit more about what they found that's informing next steps. So we did have some bright spots. So I took the top handful of statements, and you can see these are all I statements this year, and that was really the big shift in wording. It was very much my experience or what I believe, as opposed to more generic. So I believe learning is important in my school, so I was thrilled to see that had a high score there. I have opportunities to be successful. I enjoy specials or electives. My family's treated nicely or with respect. My teachers challenge me to think, and I believe school rules are consistently enforced. Those are great things to have as bright spots.
I don't know if I asked you this, but or you might have said it. When they're younger, do they change the vocabulary?
They really don't, but I like specials versus electives, is there
Yeah.
for, and then because the teachers kind of walk them through, they can help, with vocabulary a little
they
bit
have
more.
more,
If they
yeah,
have a question, if the
understanding
kid,
the question.
yeah, explain it in, maybe, like, remember, our specials, our music,
I mean, some of those
Quiet,
like
that
the
kind
little
of thing.
ones. Yeah, wrap their head around.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then some opportunities for improvement. This first one has come up many years in a row. And I feel students are nice or show respect to each other at my school. And I think we talked about this before, is that, you know, that's talking about how I think other students are. And so as principals have told me, you can find as you start digging deeper, like one interaction can impact how you answer that question. So we're constantly working on making sure that students are being respectful of each other and showing kindness, and through our SEL curriculum, and
I said,
the work
if
they
I was a
do.
little kid, I would like, so one kid was mean to me, I'd be like, oh, no way, you know, like I just,
Frowny
you know,
face,
like
frowny
it's just
face.
like that, it's like whatever like left you with that visceral, you know, like something happened to you, like.
And you had a
it
particular student you told me about, so.
Yeah, we traded first grade stories. Well, you didn't have like, it wasn't a student, it was your mother. But that'll be something else, we can share that later.
Called
I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry, Mom, if you're watching, no, I'm kidding. She recorded, you know. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
exactly.
I know,
No,
I'm
she's gonna-
sorry,
she's gonna
well, I
get
can't
that.
say the
It's okay.
student.
Mine
I
watches,
imagine-
I don't say
my mother is absolutely amazing, but there was
It's a
one
cute
day
story.
she forgot to come, she let me come home for lunch,
Yeah, we
and
used
she
to walk
forgot
home
and
for
went to
lunch
have lunch with a
when we were in
friend,
grade
so
school.
it was.
We got to walk home for
I-
lunch when we were in grade
Yeah,
school.
that was,
That
that
was
was
our
really
thing.
good.
It's an
Because we
aside, it
live
was a
close to our
mistake,
schools.
Mom was amazing, it's just all fun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and she forgot and like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's still a story they share, I'm sure.
It is.
Yeah.
So, the other piece that I like going to school each day. I believe my teachers care about me. I feel there are healthy food choices. I think we've had the conversation about the healthy food choices before, as well as that we have evidence that we're working to have more and more healthy choices.
Right?
And and again, this is the student's perspective, and
Yeah, and
maybe
it's all relative, right?
right.
Like, I
And
mean,
yeah, so it is
some of these
perspective.
questions kind of drive me nuts a little bit, I'm just saying.
It's still high though, I mean.
I
It
know.
really is,
I know.
that's the,
Like,
you
that's
Like for
need to have,
food,
like,
food is the
benchmarks
one that's
that-
always
yeah.
picked on.
They're all
Like in the
above
hospital,
3.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is above
Yeah.
neutral.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
above neutral.
They're
So
on the positive side of neutral.
I 100% agree.
positive side of neutral.
So
Well, in the hospital, they do for reviews on food. I mean, it's the biggest, you know, like with food. It's just like it's not,
kids don't even eat.
and it's so subjective. I mean,
don't
I
eat
guess.
in high
I
school.
yeah.
Oh, my
never
boys
ate
ate in
when I
high
was
school.
Mine did, here and there. Yeah.
Boys are different from girls.
Right. True.
Oh yeah, everything inside. The cardboard pizza even better.
Right. Oh, I love those big pizzas.
So-
Anyway.
So I totally agree that these are still strong scores, but those are areas that we always want to continue to improve. Obviously, it's we want kids to feel successful and like they belong, and have classmates who are kind and show respect.
I got one thing on that one, you know, the
I thought you
three,
were done.
well, I'm sorry, I'm not. I wrote something on here and I have to say it. Well, we just went over survey results at my work, because we are always doing that. And like some of the surveys will literally link to our performance and our raises, okay? So, you know, we're down, we're always up on this one survey item from the patients. And so we talk about service recovery and like, okay, so we're down on this, so, you know, what do we need to do? It was like explaining things more thoroughly, that kind of thing, and we were always high. And so we're like, what's going on, you know, like what, you know? So my question would be, is those 3, let's say the top 3, do you guys come up with like specific, like, we're gonna hone in on this one, you know, like this action plan, like have scripting, like everybody's doing the kind of the same scripting, or to really hone in on it to get scores up? I guess if it impacts like learning or
Right.
wanting to be at school, I mean, the important ones really, I mean, they're all important, but.
So we haven't done that specific thus far. I can say what we've talked about for this year. As a district, on our district scorecard, we have kind of the overall mean that we want to grow.
Okay.
And then you might see a school look at a piece or two
Yeah.
that they really wanna focus on.
Okay. Because I think like if you're
Yeah.
all in it, like you
Yeah.
could see a score go up and it could make an impact like on the scorecard or whatever.
My question goes to like your survey,
Mhm.
were they specific questions? Because I
Yeah.
can tell you, I like going
Oh,
to school every day, how do you?
I know,
plan
it's,
and
I know,
it's so
but like-
broad, you know,
Yes.
you can't,
Yeah, so
well, that's why I
this-
feel like those three almost like relate to each other.
kids shouldn't like.
Like, going to school each day, nice and respect and my teachers care about me. It relates to I like going to school almost, like, I don't know.
Cause they're
So like I
learning,
feel like
right?
there's
It's
a,
tough. It's
there's
tough.
room for some
Yeah.
sort of like system-wide
Mhm.
action plan.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I
I
guess that's
think
all.
I have to
Right.
think, now
I
that we're
agree.
talking about it, I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like, and we're looking at our district scorecard, again next
I
week.
know.
So we did talk about, can't remember if it was specific to the student survey now that I'm saying this out loud, but that kind of thing where we would do a spot survey
Yeah.
like quarterly just to check in on progress
Okay,
on a specific item that maybe we want to improve.
yeah,
Again, overall, these items are, I don't consider any one of these like five-alarm fire kind
No,
of, but
no, no,
there
no.
are opportunities for us to reflect.
Yeah.
And we try to always point out, kind of the
because if you
plus
improve
delta of it.
that going to school each day
Right,
or the respect, I mean, that can reflect in behavior, in grades, it can just start this spiral, the snowball
for
effect.
sure. And I think you heard a little bit from Brad and Dave's presentation about how they work on
Yeah.
those things. So
Yeah, that's
we
true.
might have that more on their school
It's just very
school
interesting.
scorecard. But we did talk about, I know, one of the feedback pieces of parents just hearing more positives about their
Mhm.
student, and we talked about through communications and also as a district as leaders how we can continue to
Yeah,
help build that
Yeah.
and some specific actions around that, because that was an area we noticed.
Yeah.
So.
good.
So, we shared out these results, this summer so that schools could, review their survey results and use that rollout process to gather some additional data. And then, we are planning again to administer the survey again in spring of 2024, and that will give us some comparison data, which will be
Yeah.
more helpful, obviously. And then we want to continue to keep that high level of participation, because the more students participate, it gives more validity to our long-term analysis of results. So that's something we'll continue to encourage and remind principals, like, making sure we get that sent out so that kids can take the survey.
And then how many total questions are on the survey?
Say roughly 20.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not
It's-
real,
It's not super long,
big.
and
Okay.
without those transition items, it was a lot shorter.
Yeah, it's
Sure. Okay.
better, shorter is better for sure.
Yeah, and then so this just gives you that.
Yeah, so this is just a quick snapshot of,
Like, I believe my
Absolutely.
teachers asked.
this year it was harder to break, usually we have like 3 or 4, and it was a little broader this year, so we just,
Yeah.
wanted to hit the highs and lows.
Yeah.
And then do you separate the elementary versus the secondary results, just to kind of,
Yeah,
Kinda
we get
get
each
a
result
feel.
by school,
oh, okay.
so principals get their own
Oh, by school, you don't
results.
do like the whole grouping, okay.
I think that makes sense because that's the level that they would be administering change.
Right,
So then, for them to have the information.
and you can see differences between
I know, that,
depending
well,
on
that's what I kind of like to
climate
see.
and culture, so.
I'd like to know,
Yeah.
but it's just for my own personal.
Yeah.
Like, I believe my teachers asked me how I learned best, I'd be asking it like that week or something, I'm just saying.
I can't imagine you doing that.
Well, I mean, I know they
I just
do
don't
it,
see
I
it.
know they do
Like
it,
100%,
but like, keep
yeah.
it fresh in their
And-
minds
right.
is what I'm saying.
Right,
I'm thinking
right.
about the littles, you know,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
alright, I'm not listening to your jokes.
I'm just
Okay.
with her.
Hey, I've been on since 4 AM this morning. Okay, so next one is discussion item, reoccurring, CNL committee calendar, I almost said CNI.
Some
Mr.
places
Munoz likes to say CNI.
He does, I
That's all right.
say T.
It's legal.
TL.
TNO.
Teaching and
Oh.
learning now.
We just don't wanna forget the analytics,
Yeah.
because,
Remember CL and A.
right, so.
CNLA.
Mm.
We should change it.
CLA, claw.
Yeah,
CLA,
claw.
claw, that's.
No.
Is it caw? Caw. Not lack.
Right, exactly, there, yeah, claw was the best we could come up with.
Okay, so yep, the
at this moment,
calendar.
So
we're up to date on our
Oh,
calendar.
yeah, wait till you hear the news. Wait,
And we have nothing scheduled
I
for
see.
September.
So,
So we have that placeholder, we have the meeting scheduled on the 19th. If something comes up, we will add
True.
it. But I don't know that I will have the things for October ready to go in September, so.
so it's just perfect
Um,
time to start with that other policy.
Well, I had talked about it, taking a look at the curriculum policy and
Yeah.
I,
That's
We
my,
have meetings, other meetings still.
yes, exactly. The preference would be over
All
the
the
next
things.
few weeks to make sure our focus is
Right.
really on getting the school year started.
Early, yeah.
And then if we're able to move into that policy, that would be great, but I'm also, like,
Well,
there's a
we'll
lot's
get
gonna
there,
happen
yeah.
in, you know, there's just a lot to
We
do
can
in the
get
next
there.
couple weeks. So, you know, if the committee is comfortable with, we don't meet in September,
Yep, no
or if
meeting in
something comes
September.
up, we can certainly meet in September,
Or so
that's kinda where we are.
we wait and see kind of thing, or you wanna just cancel it? Wait and see.
I think-
Just in case.
Just in case something pops
Rather
up.
cancel than try to
Yeah.
schedule us. I
Correct.
just-
Yeah.
So,
That makes me.
And then,
Yeah.
oh, so that one's gonna be 6 p.m. on the 18th, right?
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
18th,
Alright, I
19th,
have
whatever that, it's a Monday, right?
That I can do easily. Easier than 5:30, I'll tell you that. I was like, whoa, and I'm almost positive I blocked out my schedule, the
The
last therapy time for October 18th. But, oh, we're doing 6 p.m. on the 18th.
16 on the 18th,
Okay.
yes.
So September tentative.
Yeah, and then,
And it's entirely possible that something will come up, but we'll be ready for something, but
Yeah,
Mhm.
so at least we have
yeah, I feel better about having it and then
the 18th of October.
down to be done.
Yeah.
We have done, I was curious, cause I know, you know, we've been really working hard and you all have committed a lot of time to this. This is our 5th meeting this summer.
wow, I know.
It's-
Yeah.
We've been.
But you know what, you
We've been
got a
busy.
lot of
We got
that
some
stuff
stuff
put
done,
through.
for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean,
For sure.
it's almost kind of like good, you know, because you needed
And-
that.
And this is if we were going to do this, it's important to have it done early in the year, so we
Yeah.
can move forward with it, so.
Okay, so we set the meeting, and now
Motion.
it's adjourned, okay, so
Motion.
a motion from Nina to adjourn, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay,
We're out of here.
all opposed?
So
Get to that.
thank you, everybody.
So silly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
All of your
yeah.
work, ladies.